I have here the LUMIX S1 Mark II, and I'm also currently filming with the LUMIX S1 Mark II. And I'm going to just close this up before I get anxiety over an exposed sensor. But those of you who know me know that for the past decade, I have been a Sony D-bag trash fanboy of the century. The fact that I have two LUMIX S1 Mark II likely means that I added a couple of LUMIX S1 Mark IIs to my current Sony lineup. But then, of course, right in front of me here, I have another LUMIX camera, the LUMIX S1 Mark IIe, which is a less expensive version of the S1 Mark II, has different sensor, whatever, but still has 6K open gate up to 30 frames per second and 4K 60 frames per second in full frame in terms of the width, but it has to crop off because of sensor limitations. And I actually have right here everyone's favorite Lumix S9. All three of these cameras purchased with my own money. I am not the type of person that's going to make you wait until the end of the video to let you know what I did, but obviously I switched. I switched 100% from Sony to LUMIX. I bought these three cameras myself, and the camera that I'm filming with is the long-term loaner I got from LUMIX about a month ago. Now, there's those of you who are going to sit here and say that I'm a shilling piece of shit, that freaking the only reason I'm doing this because LUMIX paid me money or something like that. No, LUMIX loaned me the S1 Mark II to try out. I have been a known LUMIX hater. Not really, but like that's what people view me as. The fact is, if you go back and watch all of my hater videos, I was really just clowning on the LUMIX fanboys. I'm going to repeat this again for all you LUMIX fanboys before you start crying to your mom. Oh, Vu Win on YouTube said he doesn't like LUMIX. He doesn't want to switch to it.
You need to switch to Panasonic S1R Mark II for open gay.
Why would I want to switch to Panasonic to be openly gay? First of all, why does my opinion matter so much to you? And even my most popular video about the LUMIX S5 Mark II, Mark IIX, that people still watch and still, talk shit to me, for hating on LUMIX. I literally recommended that video that people who are just getting into videography, filmmaking, all that stuff without an investment in any camera system, I actually recommended to look at LUMIX. Sony is the greatest camera company of all time. I am a Sony fanboy. You could probably tell that from this video. And I'm also not saying that the Panasonic S5 Mark IIX, you got that camera, you could do a lot of things with it. Yes, 4K 60 is, APS-C, but there's things you can do to alleviate that. Yes, there is rolling shutter, but you don't have to do pans really quickly all the time. Not every video requires that. So I get it. It's a great camera. I'm just saying, y'all need to slow your roll and stop deep-throating that Panasonic. And obviously they've done some things, and obviously they've done things enough to make me switch out of Sony. So, after a month of use and going through all the lens options that I have, using the camera, being in the community, a lot of these things matter when you're going to go into a camera brand or something like that, or buying a car or whatever. If you're into, going more in depth with whatever you're purchasing, you're going to be in part of the community. And what I have come to realize is that fanboys in every camera brand are just a bunch of D-bags, a bunch of trash, a bunch of low self-esteem asshats, ignorant, don't know shit about cameras, don't know shit about other cameras, and barely know shit about their own camera. And even within brands, there are fanboys of specific camera. So there's infighting between S5 Mark II users and people who are recommending S1 Mark II to them. There's infighting between FX3 and A7 IV users, or A7S3 and FX3 users, or FX3 users making fun of ZVE1 users. There is just so much brand loyalty. There's so much worshiping of their own investments that it's just stupid. You know, these are companies that provide you with equipment, gear that you may or may not need for your business or for your hobby or whatever. And they're businesses and they're here to make money. You know, people think it's like, oh, Sony's going to release a camera and they're going to destroy this. Canon's going to release this and destroy them. And then Lumix going to release this and it's going to destroy this. These aren't sports teams, guys. These are cameras. At the end of the day, you know, you buy what works for you. Like, don't allow someone else's camera choice to be offensive to you. If you watch some of my previous videos where like I'm clowning on Lumix, I'm clowning on Canon or whatever, I don't do this because like the cameras are bad. I do this because the fanboys are obnoxious. You know, I buy like something for Sony, I'm reviewing something for Sony, and then I get comments saying, oh, you should have bought a Lumix, you should have did this, that, and the other. And then of course I respond. And when I respond, I say some wild shit. And then it seems like I'm talking shit about like Canon. I'm talking shit about I'm talking shit about Lumix. The reality is I'm just talking shit to the fanboys. But like, I'm completely aware of what the other camera brands are capable of, you know, and I'm not about to disrespect that. Like, I know all these cameras, you put it in the right hands, it's going to create amazing content, amazing footage, films, whatever you want to call it. I understand that there was probably some Sony fanboys that unsubscribed to me, you know, the past month or so because I was like using Lumix and all that stuff. 8 years ago, I was probably like that. Like if I saw a YouTuber that I was watching and I was learning about Sony gear or whatever from them, and then all of a sudden they switched to Canon or something, I'm like, oh, you know, screw this guy's a loser, and I just leave. It's really immature because you gain a lot of value watching this dude. It's not just for the camera, but like just watching the dude's films or lighting, whatever it is. You know, it's not always about the camera they're using. You could just use all the Sigma lenses, all those Sigma L mount, aka loser mount lenses. Just use that, you know, and you're perfectly fine. There's plenty of lenses for you. What I just said there is probably what's going to make you think that I'm hating on Lumix because I called it loser mount, because I'm being sarcastic. I'm messing with you. Okay, I'm trolling you and you're letting me do that. And then because of that, suddenly you have this bias thinking that I'm trashing your camera or whatever. And if you want me to read off specs and all that stuff, you know, go through freaking dynamic range, go through every single codec and all that stuff, there's other videos for that. There's ChatGPT for that. There's Google for that. There is all kinds of bullshit that you could look at to find that out. Okay. My value is sharing you my experience, my perspective, based on my use case. And for those of you who don't know, I am a filmmaker, videographer, cinematographer, whatever stupid title that I need to give myself to make myself feel better. But basically, I hold a camera, I point it, and I shoot it, and then I edit videos with it, whatever you want to call that. So if you want to think that Lumix loaning me a camera and 24 to 60 millimeter f2.8 Lumix lens, and that influenced me, and that I am biased towards Lumix and all this stuff because they're, you know, loaning me these things, you could think that. Like, there's nothing I could do to change your mind, okay? I said it once before and I'll say it again. I don't know why it is so hard to believe that a new camera released in 2025 is giving me better overall, like, performance, better overall image, better overall technology than a camera that was released in 2020, such as my Sony FX3. And I'll go into this a little bit later, but I am keeping one Sony body. I'm currently deciding on whether I want to keep my Sony FX3 or my Sony ZVE1. And a couple of reasons for that is there's times because of Sony's brand marketing and all that stuff, there are a lot of productions, a lot of people who use Sony. And then let's say I want to help out someone filming weddings and they're on Sony. They're probably going to want me to film on Sony also. So I have my Sony FX3 And the lens that I will be keeping is this Sony 28-70 f2 GM lens. GM stands for got money because it's a $3,000 lens. For whatever reason, probably because it's constant aperture f2 and it goes from a range of 28 to 70 zoom. So, and of course, I'm a tube doucher shill, so there's a lot of Sony E-mount lenses that come out, and I would probably want to review them. So I need to have a body on hand just so that I could do E-mount stuff. And of course, I'll use it time to time for whatever. But moving forward, you're going to see all my YouTube videos are going to be filmed on Lumix. All of my client work will be filmed on Lumix. You know, when I film weddings and stuff, Lumix will be my main camera, and Lumix will also be my angle cameras. As probably 3 weeks ago, my decision was to use just one Lumix as my main camera and then use like the Sony bodies as my angle camera still. But I decided to just go all in and just do like the complete switch to Lumix as my main stuff, and just kind of have a Sony sitting on the side. I mean, first of all, you know, Sony fanboys to sit there and think that, you know, I'm a piece of trash and that I'm hating on Sony or something. I still like Sony cameras, okay? I still like the FX3. I still like the lenses and all that stuff. I just think right now, Lumix is offering everything that I want in a camera, features, and in terms of the future outlook. They're doing things that align more with my style, what I want camera brands to do. And that's part of the reason why I did the switch. But if you look at the body, you know, the S1 Mark II is a $3,200 camera. It is not cheap by any means. But when you compare it to, when you look at what it's capable of, and then you try to look for the next camera that can do what it does, that's like 20 grand. Again, 6K open gate, 10-bit, 420. It does RA log. It has phase detect autofocus. Something that a lot of people don't realize, that Lumix has good autofocus now. I'm really surprised in like these videographer threads that I'm in on like Facebook and all that stuff. When I say that I filmed something on Lumix, they're like, oh, doesn't have bad autofocus, this, that, and the other. The vast majority of people don't really keep up with cameras like me. I'm a camera nerd, whatever, tube doucher. And a lot of people just don't know. In my opinion, Lumix, the phase detect autofocus in the Lumix S1 Mark II, S1 Mark IIe, and I'm assuming the S1R2 are fantastic. In my opinion, based on my experience with FX3 and the best autofocus system that I have tried on Sony is from my ZV-E1, and the way I use autofocus, the Lumix S1 Mark II autofocus is better than the Sony ZV-E1. When I need it to focus on a subject, it is more sticky. It locks on, it doesn't jump. It, you know, in terms of just focus tracking, when both Sony and Lumix is focused on a subject and it is tracking on that particular subject, it is great. They're both great. When it comes to just the reliability of how sticky it is on the subject you want it to be on after you tap on the subject, Lumix is more sticky. Basically, I have a lot less issues of Lumix autofocus jumping around from different subjects in a busy scene. And when there's situations where things have been sketchy for me based on my experience with Sony, for example, I've spoke about this before, but like when you are filming a wedding and like things are crossing in front of your lens between the lens and the subject, such as bubbles or anything, there is a way for me to just make sure that the camera would just stick onto the subject, which I just put my finger and just hold the focus point on that subject and it will stay there. Whereas Sony, I don't really have the option other than trying to keep tapping back and forth. However, once I have to tap, it's already too late, because the reason why I would tap is because, you know, the autofocus decided to focus on a bubble or something in like a bubble send-off. But again, you know, all autofocusing systems aren't perfect. There's always some type of finicky thing here and there. It just could happen out of nowhere. It is not only Lumix, Sony does the same damn thing. So at the end of the day, if you're worried about Lumix auto, if you're interested in using Lumix, but you're not sure about the autofocus, I'm telling you right now, don't worry about it. Shit works, period. All right. I'm going to be all over the place because I'm not a typical reviewer, but I'm also not going to cover too much about photography because in terms of photography, every single camera that you could buy right now over $1,000 is going to be a good photography camera. At the end of the day, it just really ends up being your preference in resolution, body grip, lenses, whatever it is that, you know, you want, speed, what have you. But in terms of photography, my use case, if and when I do need photography, the Lumix camera is going to provide me with my photography needs. I mean, to throw out a spec, this thing, the Lumix S1 Mark II does 70 frames per second with electronic shutter. And of course, when you use third-party lenses like, I don't know, a Sigma 7200 f2.8, you could actually use the whole 70 frames per second without issue on a quote-unquote third-party lens. And I know Sigma is part of the L-mount alliance, and L-mount alliance just means that these camera brands are sharing this one mount. So Sigma has Sigma makes camera bodies, Leica, Lumix, they all make camera bodies, and so they're all sharing the L mount on their camera. But in terms of lenses, Sigma sells E mount, L mount, and I think Nikon Z mount for Nikon or whatever. All because Sigma is part of the L mount alliance, it does not mean that it is a first party lens for Lumix cameras. First party lenses for Lumix cameras are Panasonic Lumix lenses like this 24-60. But in terms of Sigma is to Lumix cameras as a lens manufacturer is no different than Sony. The only difference is Sony and Lumix both lock off features from third-party lenses like Sigma. So there is hybrid zooming, which is a function on all these newer Lumix cameras that enables you to zoom with your lens. So if you have a 24-60, you can set it to be a mixture of optical zoom and digital zoom using like a digital crop. So like you could get, you know, as you zoom from 24-60, it will really be like, I don't know, 24 to like 100, whatever it is, you know, 100 or something like that. You can't do that with Sigma lenses on the Lumix body. And with Sony, they obviously limit your frame rate. So I think they limit all they limit all third-party lenses to only like 15 frames per second or something. So like when you have like an A1 or an A9 super fast camera, you can't go more than 15 frames per second, even though those cameras are capable of like 120 frames per second, 30 frames per second, whatever. As far as I know, you can shoot 70 frames per second with Sigma lenses. So that is that. Now, in terms of like going back to the body of this camera, I think it's the best looking camera that's out right now in terms of just, I think it's the best looking mirrorless body right now. I like the black, I like the red accents with it. This thing just looks awesome. Obviously the lens is fully tilting, fully articulating, the whole 9 yards. You know, Lumix doesn't hold back on even their cheaper S1 Mark IIe. The S1 Mark IIe here does the same thing. It has a fully articulating lens. So that's what Lumix does. Now the S9 here has just like a standard, you know, the flip out screen or whatever. So for the price, $3,200, Lumix is the only brand that allows you to use your entire sensor for video. So for those of you who aren't familiar, when you shoot photos with these cameras, you use the whole entire sensor. You know, it's a 3:2 ratio. You use the whole sensor. However, Sony, Nikon, Canon, when you shoot video, it cuts off a bit of the top and the bottom of the sensor and it gives you a 16:9 ratio. So it's more. And for most people, that makes sense because it fits on most TVs, 16:9. Lumix allows you to use the whole entire sensor the same way you get to use it when you take photos. So you get the whole 3x2. That's called open gate. Open gate allows you to do a few things. Firstly, for me, most importantly, it allows me to reframe my videos when I'm doing run and gun shooting. So right now I'm filming an open gate. So this doesn't really matter. Like, I'm just doing it because I can, but I'm filming open gate right now. If I want to later do animated, like an animated scale in, plus if I want to do an animated like tilt up and down, I could do that. If I want to, reframe to focus more on the camera that I'm holding down here on my hand, have a better composition for it, I can do that in post because I have extra space. Now, if I was only filming 16:9, part of the camera would be cut off. And that's just for me sitting here. But like when I'm filming a wedding or something, it just allows me a lot more space to reframe, to keyframe, animate as well. If I want to add movement into my edit, I have the room there. The other thing is for anamorphic. When you film an anamorphic and you're only filming 16:9, you're losing, again, the top and bottom. And then once you stretch it out, because on a 16:9 image, it's going to be way too narrow of a shot. It's going to, like, the aspect ratio is going to be just way too wide, way too narrow. And then so with open gate, obviously once you stretch it out, it's going to be more narrow, but at least it's going to be more usable. So like, for example, this is a Blazar Mantis 1x0.33x. When you de-squeeze on a 16:9 sensor, you're still going to get pretty reasonable crop bars top and bottom. It's like close to like a 2:35:1 ratio. It's pretty much the ratio that most people do when they like add crop bars to their 16:9. So it looks fine, right? However, on open gate, you get almost a full 16:9 image with the 1.33 anamorphic. And obviously you could go 1.6, you could do 1.5, 2.0, and get more footage for your anamorphic. And the other common one is using open gate to be able to film horizontal and vertical. And a lot of people are saying that, they want to be able to take their vertical content and then be able to use it for vertical footage later. That's great and all, but like you could really do that with 16:9. And I said this before, it is not a huge deal to have, extra top and bottom for that, going 16:9 to vertical. It hasn't been a big deal for me in the past. And it's not something that I'm sitting there like, oh yeah, I need to do that. That's why I did a video on it, and I still stand by it, that reason for open gate is overrated. However, I think it is really invaluable for the opposite. I had a client that wanted specifically vertical video. So if I filmed it vertically, that's it. That's the only deliverable this person can have, right? But I decided to film open gate so I get really good vertical resolution, even though freaking IG, TikTok has like 720p or something like that. But I got really good vertical resolution. But then if they ever request a horizontal video, 16:9 video for like their website or for YouTube or something like that, I have it. Because if I just film vertically, that thing is gone, So open gate allows me to film things specifically as vertical for the main deliverable, but then the horizontal thing is there also. 16:9, you're gonna have to back up more. If you're trying to get good shallow depth of field, you're gonna lose some of that shallow depth of field if you're gonna be backing up doing 16:9. And then if you do vertical, obviously if they go and ask you for a horizontal video, they're kind of shit out of luck. So it is really beneficial for that. And why Sony's not doing it, I don't know. I could take a guess that it's probably going to cause some overheating, some processing issues, because it seems like very little, but having to process those extra pixels top and bottom takes a lot more out of your camera. A lot of people have noticed that there has been some overheating issues with the Lumix S1 Mark II, S1 R2, and the S1IIE. The only time I ever gotten these cameras to overheat is doing like overheat tests in freaking 90-degree direct sunlight. Filming it on client shoots, weddings, and all that stuff, I haven't gotten it to overheat. And that includes me filming 5.9K 60, 6K open gate. The 5.1K 60 is open gate, and I didn't get it to overheat. Now, I'm also smart about it, knowing that if I had to film something for longer than a 5-minute straight take, I just filmed it in 4K 60, especially like, wedding processionals and all that stuff out in direct sunlight. So I've had no professional issues with it. The only time I got it to overheat was when I was trying to get it to overheat, and that's the only time I ever had issues with it. Now, I'm not saying that it's not going to happen. I'm not saying that, the big reason why I haven't gotten, the big reason why I'm not interested in getting an S1R2 is because of its overheating. It has a lot more overheating issues. Also, though, rolling shutter performance is not great. And, a lot of people say the S1R2 image, has the best image out of all the new cameras. I don't doubt it. I mean, there's 8K and all that stuff. But to me, coming from Sony FX3 A7siii ZV-1 that has really good rolling shutter performance, I cannot go back to anything worse. And so the S1 Mark II has great rolling shutter performance when it is in standard mode. Obviously, there's a DR boost mode, which boosts the dynamic range up, but it causes a lot of rolling shutter. I'm probably not going to use that. I'm not going to use that feature much, if at all. But in terms of dynamic range, I mean, look at any camera between 3,000 and 12,000. The Lumix S1 Mark II is going to have the same dynamic range performance as those cameras. So you're going from FX3, you're not going to notice much of a difference with the Lumix S1 Mark II dynamic range. There is no other camera that is better than the Lumix S1 Mark II for video until probably you go into $20,000 with autofocus. There's no other video camera that has good autofocus that is as good as the Lumix S1 Mark II. I mean, there's some of you, and I used to believe that maybe it's the A1 Mark II, 8K, does 4K 60, 4K 120. The only problem is I just realized this. 4K in the A1 and the A1 Mark II is pixel binned. So that completely just erases that camera off of its top tier camera mindset I had on it. Once I get certain quality, it's tough for me to go back, right? So again, I have a certain type of dynamic range I like. I cannot go back to something less. I get 10-bit colors. I'm not going back to 8-bit colors. I get 6K open gate. I can't go back to 4K 16:9. I get 4K 60 full frame. I'm not going to go to 4K 60 cropped. If I get super sampled 4K, if I get pixel to pixel 4K, I'm not going to pixel bin 4K. Just not. So all this time I thought that, hey, if the A1 Mark II had open gate, that'd be the go-to camera. But seeing that it's pixel binned, I actually wouldn't even buy that camera for video. That's just me, I'm not saying the pixel bin footage looks bad or something on the A1. It's just super sampled or pixel to pixel resolution is always going to be better than pixel bin. The rest, buttons are buttons. You customize these buttons whatever you want. Obviously you're gonna have to get used to the menus. Obviously, when you first get the camera, there's a learning curve. You're gonna have to spend a couple weeks getting used to it. Obviously setting up your settings, actually go shoot something, adjust your settings, go shoot something, adjust your settings to your liking. And that's what I did. The first week, if I would say there's a downside, some of my gripes, if they're negatives to, the Lumix S1 Mark II, the menus, in my opinion, are atrocious. I feel like they are more confusing than Sony. And this is after me using these Lumix cameras for a month. But, obviously, after I set up my custom menus, I got used to it. I kind of know where to find things now. But I'm telling you, some things just doesn't make sense. I shouldn't be able to find HDMI settings in multiple different places. I feel like all the HDMI settings should be in one place. That's just one example. The screen quality is great. Viewfinder is great. Coming from Sony, this screen is 1,000 times better. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Everything else is personal preference. There's a little button here that's specifically for autofocus. And when I first got the camera, I was trying to get autofocus tracking turned on, and there's no way to actually turn it on in the menu. And of course, when I first got the camera, I had a shoot that same day, and I just took the camera and just went on the shoot. I didn't even like bother like, warming up or testing it out or anything. I just went and just started shooting with it. And I just could not find how to get continuous autofocus tracking. And of course, it's all controlled with this button, but you can't get to it in this menu, which is kind of weird. So I think, you should be able to get to whatever options are in this button in the menu. It shouldn't just be limited to this button. But again, that's just me. I don't really use the viewfinder much. So I would have preferred, obviously, the body to be like an FX3 or something. But I understand these are hybrid cameras. And when you're buying these cameras, you need to understand that they're hybrid cameras. They're meant to be able to do good video and photo. And the reason why a lot of these cameras are always looked at as being video cameras is because they have the best video specs, video features out of all cameras, even cameras that are dedicated as cinema line. So again, I'm not trying to pick on the FX3. I know it's like 5 years old. Okay. A lot of people would say, like, why would I switch from, such a good ecosystem, Sony, to go to Lumix, which is not as good as ecosystem? I realized something. Okay. And there is a lot of misconceptions about these things. There's a lot of assumptions. There's a lot of, hearsay and everything. But at the end of the day, it really depends on you as the shooter. But a lot of people will say, including myself, before I got in, tried it, Lumix lacks lenses. And the L mount lacks lenses. Right now, if you just look at the sheer amount of lenses each lens mount has, sure, you could say Lumix lacks lenses. Sony has the most. And Sony has the most in terms of just lenses provided by Sony, not just like third party. Like Sony just has a lot of lenses. They have G Master f1.4s, G Master f1.2 lenses. They also have 1.8 Sony lenses. They also have multiple different types of f2.8 zooms, 24 to 50 f2.8, 24 to 70, obviously, f2.8, 28 to 70 f2. And, that's just Sony glass. And then you also have friggin' every other third party manufacturer out there. Tamron is and I'm telling you, one of the big reasons why I was hesitating to go to Lumix was because they don't have Tamron, and because I really like the Tamron 70 to 80. It's a very cheap telephoto. Could be had for like $1,000 or less, depending where you look. Lumix doesn't have that. Lumix has Sigma, and it has Panasonic Lumix 70 to 200. So this is one of the lenses that I got, Sigma 70 to 200 f2.8, DGDN for L mount. I mean, it's a great, it's a great lens. It's comparable to the, Sony 70 to 200, GM Mark II f2.8. Lumix obviously has their own 2.8 70 to 200, but this one is smaller, it's lighter, has great performance. But the only downside is I wouldn't have minded if it was cheaper. I wouldn't have minded if it was smaller and lighter. I don't necessarily need to go all the way to 200, but this is what I got for Lumix to replace not having a 70 to 180 Tamron. And, the other telephoto lens I had for Sony was a 135 millimeter f1.8 GM lens. I don't have that. The only option I have is the 135 Sigma lens, which I've used. It works fine, on E-mount before, but that is like an older lens that was designed for DSLR and basically just has an internal adapter for mirrorless cameras. And it's going to work fine for my use case. Like I don't need it to be fast autofocusing. I don't need it to be crazy. It's an angle lens that I use for interviews or weddings. And once I lock on focus, I just turn autofocus off. It just stays there. As long as the image quality is good, I'm good. And the image quality on the Sigma 135 is good. So, those are like my two biggest concerns in terms of lenses. But, as I matured and as I went through, as I've matured as a videographer, debag, trash filmmaker, I just realized that I don't need all these lenses. You know, I don't need to collect all these prime lenses. I just need to have lenses that I like, that I need. And so, you know, before I'd value Sony mount because it has like all those 35, 50, 85 millimeter f1.4 primes. You could get those f1.4 primes. You could get those f1.4 primes on L mount from Sigma. So a lot of times people compare Sigma to GM lenses, and it's usually right there. You know, maybe splitting hairs on autofocus, but in terms of image quality, it's there. Sigma tends to be a little bit bigger, heavier, whatever, but the options are there. Again, Sony just has more lenses to choose from, but you have to think about how you are as a shooter, what lens you need. Half of dudes on Sony use a 24-70. That's what they use. A lot of them use Tamron 20-75. A lot of them use 24-70 f2.8, the old one. Videographers are generally poor pieces of trash. Videographers don't know how to market themselves, don't know how to sell the same way photographers do. I see videographers all the time taking gigantic jobs for like $200 for the whole day. It's crazy, okay? But most of them have one lens. So if they want a 24, if they need to go to Lumix, they have a plethora of 24-70, 24-60 lenses to choose from. So for me, my biggest loss is the 28-70 f2, but it wasn't that big of a deal because I just ended up just getting a Sigma 28-45 f1.8 for L mount. I actually like the look of this lens better than the GM 28-70. It's just for weddings and running gun shooting, being able to go up to 70 is awesome. But one thing you don't realize that I was on an FX3 limited to 12 megapixels. So I don't have APS-C mode on FX3, in 4K. It's limited to 1080. But I do have that on Lumix. So if 45 wasn't enough or whatever, I could just go into APS-C mode and get up to basically 70 millimeters with my 45, and it'll be equivalent more to like a 70 2.8. So it's not going to be as good as a 70 f2, but still gets me there, and I'm getting the image, the bokeh that I like out of this. So it's kind of not really a loss. For my YouTube videos, I like using 24 millimeters, and so I kind of lose out on some of the cheaper 24 millimeter options available on Sony. I used to use the 24 millimeter GM, but my GM 24 died. So 5 different brands that has 24 millimeter f1.8 for E-mount. The only option I got that made sense was the Sigma 24 f2, which is what I'm filming with right now. So that solves that problem. Nice, small, compact lens. For traveling, obviously, I have the 24-60 f2.8 here, but it's still not as nice as a 24-50 G, which is a lot smaller, lighter. So there's that. Other than that, that's it. Like, that's really all the lenses I really care about. I don't need anything else, If I want to get 85 1.4, Sigma's there. Viltrox, I heard, is coming. Sirui is going to start producing more lenses. So L-mount's lens collection is starting to start growing. But in terms of what it has right now, it has everything that I need. So it has everything I need and want, to be quite honest. It's all available for me there. One thing I did notice so the L-mount version of the same Sigma lenses on E-mount new are slightly more expensive. And I think it has something to do with demand. Obviously, there's a lot more people on E-mount, so those lenses could be cheaper because people are buying that left and right, whereas the L-mount version is going to sit for a bit on the shelves before they're bought. But if you're talking about video, you also have better options for anamorphic, not because the lack of lenses available for E-mount, but the fact that the bodies don't film anamorphic as well, as nice as Lumix, because Lumix has open gate. So I have here the collection of Blazar Mantis lenses. I have 35, I have a 50, and I have the 75 Mantis. And I also have here the Sirui Saturn 75 for L-mount that I'm going to be reviewing pretty soon on my channel, so subscribe for that. So yeah, that's my current setup for on Lumix, you know, in terms of replacing what I was able to do with Sony, but now I'm able to do everything I was doing with Sony and then some, because of obviously being able to do 6K and all that stuff. Like, is Sony FX3 4K somehow like obsolete or something? No, absolutely not. It looks great. It's just once I got into edit, once I filmed with the Lumix, got used to the body, it just works so well. And then when I look at the footage when I'm editing it, it just looks so good. Like the quality, the detail, you know, low light. You know, I said in the previous video, the S1 Mark II low light at 12,800, in my opinion, is better than the FX3 at 12,800, simply because it's less mushy. You know, there's some noise. They both have noise. It's just because 6K, the noise is very fine and all that stuff. It just looks more detailed. It just looks better on the Lumix S1 Mark II. And there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It's just tough for me to go back. And then, you know, at first, you know, after 2 weeks of using the Lumix S1 Mark II, I decided that I was gonna, you know, use Lumix as my main camera and then just have Sony as my side camera. However, after seeing some of the things that Sony has been doing, FX2 and then the recent RX1 Mark III for like $5,100, like, I don't have a problem with a camera like that being, you know, $5,100. It's like a novel item. It's like a certain type of camera for, like, you know, photographers and all that stuff. But the way it executed it just rubbed me the wrong way. You know, you're looking at like a 10-year-old body that they did not change at all. They literally just threw in their current sensor and processor and call it a day. It's the same lens, same everything. They didn't. If they made some changes to the old body, you know, made it better, used different materials, added this, that, and the other, and then charged $5,100, I could kind of see that. But they literally just recycled. They just recycled stuff from other cameras and just threw it in there and then just charged a ton of money. And then you look at the accessories, they're charging a ton of money. And to me, they are banking on people's FOMO, people's want of just having something new. It's just impractical is all that I have to say about it. But it just shows me the direction of where Sony is going for the future. Because when I first bought into Sony's system back in 2014, they were a small camera like division. They weren't big. They were selling their cameras for cheaper and they're offering better features. They had 1080-60 for like $500-600 in like a Sony Nex6. Canon was like 2,000-3,000 for like 1D Mark 5D Mark III or something like that. It was just cheaper to get into and better specs. But now, as we are moving forward and as Sony has grown a lot in market share, just second behind Canon for like overall, but I think amongst content creators, videographers and stuff, I think Sony is dominating that market share. And now people are buying Sony just because it's that name. That's the camera everyone has. You know, it's an easy buy. It's like why people buy Apple or something. You know, everyone's using it. It works. People buy it. The problem is now that I'm noticing is Sony has become such a big camera company. They're already a huge company, period, but their camera division is big now. And with all big companies, once they have like this loyal user base ecosystem built out, they start to believe that they know what you need, what you want, and they think they know what's best for you. Look at Apple, how they lock off all of their stuff. You can't customize it because this is what you need. This is what you want. You know, that's all. And you can't customize anything. That's why I'm on Android. That's why I use PC. I want my computer to be able to play games, AAA games, at ultra settings, and I need to be edit fast as shit. My Lenovo Legion 7i with RTX 5080 does all that. Okay. I want to be able to customize shit on my phone. My Android does that. My Google Pixel does that. I want to be able to use every single ounce of ability, sensor space on my camera. I want to be confident shooting photos in 24 megapixels and then also going into video and being able to use OpenGate, 4K 60, whatever, in the camera. Lumix does that. Sony FX3 doesn't. And 5-year-old camera. We always talk about Sony being the FX3 being a 5-year-old camera. Why is this 5-year-old camera increased in pricing from $3,800 to $4,100? Technically it's FX3A, but those whatever they did with that camera is not warranted that $300 increase. Matter of fact, because it's an older camera, it should drop in price, right? But and then you could argue that maybe the new very slightly better monitor, camera screen, and whatever other random small knickknack feature they added could maybe add $100 to it or whatever, even though it doesn't. And you could say tariffs or whatever, but you don't see Lumix increasing their prices after tariffs. Sony's the one who's doing that. So they just know that people are going to buy their cameras no matter what at this point. They're like at that level where they have so much influence. A lot of creators use it. Everyone is going to have a Sony camera. And most people, when they buy into a brand, they become very brand loyal, which is why you see a lot of just people talking shit online about other people's camera choices. I just don't like the direction Sony is going. I am not confident in Sony that within the next year, they're going to release anything that is remotely close to what a Lumix S1 Mark II can do for video that's even close to this price range. Talking about $3,200. It's not going to happen. They might have something, but it's not. It's going to be like at least $6,500. It's going to be It's going to be more than $5,000 for sure. I have a hard time seeing that a camera with these video capabilities from Sony being cheaper than an A1 Mark II, which is $6,500. That's my opinion on it. They're stuck in their tiered, video system. So you want to move up, you got to go to FX6. You want to move up, you got to go to Burano. Their smaller camera systems is reserved for like FX3, and to them that's good enough in this space. If you want better than this, you gotta go up in size and price. I want my cameras to be this big, okay? And sure, there's risk of overheating, which I've never experienced. So when I do film for clients and stuff, I do rig out my camera. My whole rig is in this video here. And basically it uses a dummy battery, and it uses a dummy battery to V-mount, and I'm using external SSD recording, which Sony also doesn't do. So I'm able to record out of USB-C to an SSD. So that takes out the battery out of the body and the recording out of the body to limit the heat on the body. So that's what I do, and it works for me. And honestly, I was doing the same type of rig on my Sony FX3 when I'm doing handheld anyway. I am not here to tell you to switch. I'm just doing a review on the S1 Mark II, and I'm just explaining why I switched. These are my beliefs. This is my opinion. This is my perspective on this whole thing. Lumix still has some new cameras come on the way. So seeing what they're doing with this, I have a lot of hope and confidence for what they're going to be doing in the coming months. So that's why I invested in the system. And then you also have to understand this. I'm not like a regular videographer, corporate wedding videographer. I'm also a piece of trash YouTuber, tube doucher. it is much easier for me to switch systems. And the biggest reason is that it's easier for me to sell shit. Okay. It's easier for me to go on like Facebook Marketplace, post things on there, or, threads, because I'm known to a lot of people. This is not a flex or anything, but like when people know you, they see you, they've seen your YouTube, they feel more comfortable to buy things from you because they feel like they're just buying from someone they actually know. Whereas like if I was just some regular bloke, videographer out there, I post something up, they don't know me. They don't know if I'm shady or not. Like they don't know, there's no background on me. And then, I could easily scam them or something and disappear, and I will not suffer any consequences, right? But at least as a YouTuber with a following, the consequence I could have if I was a scammer is people could start saying, hey, look, Vu, that YouTuber is a freaking scammer. And then there goes my reputation, right? Like, and because of that, people see me as a YouTuber, as a dude with some IG following. They know that I am not going to dick around. They feel more confident buying from me, and it's easy for me to sell stuff, for the most part. Obviously, there's a lot of trash on Marketplace. You're still gonna get a bunch of, I post something for $800 and then somebody's like, I'll buy it for $400. I'm just like, you're a piece of shit. Like if you're gonna make an offer, fine, just make it reasonable, like don't do something ridiculous like that. Like I have connections with brands. So like I was able to reach out to 7 artisans and get a 75 millimeter f2 for L mount. And I'm going to feature it on my channel and all that stuff. And the reason why I asked for it, because look, I don't have to pay $200, and then I just feature it in some videos because I actually like this lens. I recommend people to buy it. It's a good lens. I'm able to do these things as a YouTube douchebag. It's easier for me to switch systems, sell my old stuff. So I'm not here telling you to freaking switch, okay? That is entirely up to you. If you're completely satisfied with whatever camera body system you're using, dude, that's great. You know what I mean? Like, a good chunk of the time when you're looking at stuff on YouTube, looking at like videos on your social media, you can't really tell the difference between camera to camera. You can't really tell unless you are looking at things side by side of the same exact shot, same lighting, same everything. And obviously I film a lot of my YouTube videos, and then when I'm looking at my YouTube stuff in the edit, I'm just like, dude, it's just way more detailed than what I'm getting from my FX3. So it's tough for me seeing that on my big screen, and like just blindly staying on Sony, knowing that this camera is out there and, for $900 cheaper. Honestly, like I'm contemplating on doing a comparison of the FX3 versus the S1II, which is the $2,500 version, because I feel like this camera might be better than the FX3 for video. So might think about how I'm going to draw that up. Another thing about Lumix you don't know is that it has APS-C modes, obviously. So you're looking at this S9, and you could get this new for anywhere between $1,200 to $1,300. Did you know that in APS-C mode, the Lumix S9 has better dynamic range than the FX3 A700 or whatever, and the Fujifilm X-T4 XH2S, which is, APS-C. So if you look at those two camera brands, Fuji and Sony, they're well known for their APS-C, right? The newest APS-C lens that everyone's talking about that came out is the Sigma 17 to 40 f1.8. It's like the God mode APS-C lens, right? Do you realize that you could buy the S9 for cheaper than the Fuji and the Sony? And if you just ignored that it is a full frame sensor and used it in APS-C mode, you get 4K 60. You get 4K 60 in APS-C mode, 10-bit 422, 420. And you get better dynamic range. You get better autofocus than Fujifilm for sure. Toss up between Sony and for video. So not only do you get a full frame camera that you could use full frame lenses for photos and 6K open gate, but in APS-C mode, it is actually better than actual other APS-C cameras. So why don't you just get an S9 for cheaper, better camera, full frame? So, and of course you have S5II X as well. You know, if you want a fuller body of the same sensor as S9. To me, right now, if you are a new videographer, douchebag trash getting into it, and you're trying to figure out what camera to buy, and your main thing is to do video, I would definitely invest into Lumix. If you are on Sony or whatever other, and you want to try out Lumix, and you only have like 1 or 2 lenses on E-mount or something, I would definitely consider trying Lumix. If you are heavily invested in Sony, Canon, whatever, you have a bunch of lenses, you have multiple bodies, and you're satisfied with the image quality you're getting, there's no reason to change. There's really no good reason to switch. It is a pain in the ass to switch. And honestly, it might be better off for you not to even try it out or rent the LUMIX S1 Mark II. Because if you give it a solid 3 weeks of use, you're probably gonna end up wanting to switch. That's just what I'm thinking. And, you know, it's gonna cause you a lot of heartache, a lot of problems. Before I go, quick side note here. I've been filming for 1 hour and 16 minutes and 58 seconds. 6K open gate, 24 frames per second, 10-bit 420, and it has not overheated. I don't even have an overheat warning. There's at one point I had USB-C charging going on. It's using battery, pro-grade XD card, no overheating. This has been a straight on 1 hour, 17-minute video. I'm gonna just go ahead and make sure I record that so you see that I am not playing around. I'll see the autofocus, whatever. So yeah, it's just sitting there on this Kofi capture sucking, you know, deep throat cup. So temperature in my house is 78 degrees, but in my office it feels a lot hotter than that. I have all of these lights on blast in here, so I am not the type of person to sweat, and I am kind of sweating. I'm sticky right now. So yeah, I'm pretty sure this camera will just keep going. It's not going to stop. So I hope this video helps you make a purchase decision. I hope it was entertaining. Hope you got a lot of information out of it. And as always, until next time, lighten up.
Hey man, that available for sale?
Yeah, it's available for $500.
Oh my god, that price is trash. How about $200?
No thanks, bro.
No man, I give you $300, cat.
No, I just recently posted it up, so I'm in no rush to sell. Price is pretty firm.
I find much cheaper online on eBay.
Where is it for sale for that price?
Let me show you. Only $400.
First of all, the condition of that item is not the same as mine. It is missing a bunch of stuff, and according to the seller, it is actually broken.
How about you ship to me $450?
All right, fine. I guess I could do $450 ship.